All right, it's great to have you all present for class. I will be teaching this class where I allow a pause for a translation to take place. This is a study on an overview of the Old Testament. This lesson's going to be called Conquering Canaan. We'll be looking at Joshua through Judges and a brief note on Ruth. Moses was the greatest leader of the Hebrew nation that had ever known. His successor, Joshua, was handpicked by God to finish the job Moses had started, as we see in Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. Joshua would be the one to lead the Israelites into the promised land and to conquer it. In Joshua chapter 1 through 12, we read of the conquest of Canaan. In a brilliant military strategy, Joshua subdued the middle part of Canaan in chapters 6 through 9. Then he would subdue the southern part of Canaan in chapter 10, followed by the northern part of Canaan in chapter 11. This conquest would take the span of around 6 to 7 years to accomplish. Joshua's leadership closely mirrored Moses' own. Just like how Moses sent spies into the promised land, Joshua began by sending 2 spies into Jericho. The 2 spies were protected by a harlot, a prostitute named Rahab. In return, she asked for her own protection for her family as well from the invading Israelite forces. Whenever the Israelites would go to conquer Jericho, they would not attack Rahab's house if she had put the scarlet cord outside the window, which she did. Rahab not only survived the destruction of Jericho, but she eventually married a Hebrew and became an ancestor of Jesus himself, as we see in the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. Joshua also led the Hebrew nation across dangerous waters. Even as Moses had led them across the Red Sea on dry ground, Exodus chapter 14, Joshua miraculously divided the water of the Jordan River in Joshua chapters 3 and 4, and allowed the Israelites to cross on dry ground. Joshua 3, verse 17, chapter 4, verse 18. God validated Joshua's leadership. Joshua chapter 1, verse 5, where it says, "Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you." Let's notice now the central campaign. God's helping hand is clearly seen in the Israelites' victory over Jericho. His strategy for penetrating the city's thick walls was for the people to march around them once a day for 6 days. Then on the seventh day, they would march around it 7 times. When they had finished this spectacle and marched the seventh and final time, suddenly the priest loudly blew their trumpets, and the people began shouting. And then it happened. The walls of Jericho fell flat, crumbled down, in Joshua 6, verse 20. Without this protective barrier, this barricade, the city was defenseless against the Israelite onslaught. Everything was destroyed. Jericho, Ai, Bethel, one after the other, these central cities fell. But not everything went according to plan. For example, God at first did not grant them victory over Ai because of an Israelite soldier named Achan. Achan sinned against God by keeping several items that he had found when conquering Jericho. And as a result, Achan and his entire family was burned. Joshua 7, verses 24 and 25. And then, because they failed to consult the Lord, Joshua 9, verse 14, Israel had made a very bad treaty with the Gibeonites, the nation of Gibeonites. Located very near Bethel, the citizens of Gibeon, they knew were next in line to be conquered. And so they made it seem like they were travelers from far away who did not live anywhere near Canaan. They wore old clothing, carried molded, crumbly bread, and asked to make a treaty with the Israelites. Only afterwards did Joshua realize they had been tricked. Joshua 9, verse 22. The southern kingdom conquest, Joshua 10. Even this unfortunate turn of events became actually a military strategy. When the kings of the southern Canaan heard about this treaty, they attacked Gibeon altogether. God's hand was with Israel, raining down hailstones on their enemies and miraculously prolonging the daylight hours and making the sun stand still. And then in one battle, Israel now was able to defeat all those in the southern kingdom, southern campaign area, and they controlled the central and southern regions of Canaan now. Now it's Joshua 11 through chapter 15, where we read of the northern conquest campaign. Jabin, the king of the northern city of Hazor, knew that they were next in line to be in a battle with the Israelites. So Jabin formed a coalition with the other kings in the north. But the Lord was with Joshua, and they easily defeated them. There were numerous pockets of resistance left to thoroughly conquer, but the land promise was now well on its way to being fulfilled. what Moses had started was now complete. Joshua chapter 11, verse 5. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses, his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses. The division of the land takes place in Joshua chapter 13 through chapter 24. The second half of the book of Joshua details the allotment of the land to the various tribes of Israel. In Joshua 21, verse 45, not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. Today, there's not a single land promise left unfulfilled. Even in the 21st century, Israel, we need to realize that that land promise was initially already fulfilled. Joshua gives a final speech in Joshua 23 and 24. The core of his message is faithfulness to God. In fact, he repeatedly warns the Israelites that if they fail to serve him faithfully, God will punish them and kick them out of Canaan. Listen to the climax of Joshua's speech, Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness in all. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The second generation of the Israelites served God very well. The next generation did not. Before I talk about the book of Judges, I want to say one thing about the book of Deuteronomy. The entire book of Deuteronomy is a renewal of Israel's covenant with God. It's like a second time that the law is being shared. Let's spend a little time now talking about the seventh book of the Bible, the book of Judges. The men and one woman served as Israel's judges. And this judge isn't like the modern understanding of a judge in a courtroom. But this judge was a heroic leader who helped pronounce God's judgment on their Israelite enemies. Some of the judges were specifically called by God, while others rose to the occasion and delivered God's people from oppression. In the days of Samuel, that's the last king, or last judge, sorry. God will finally allow the Israelites to appoint a king, thus bringing in an end to the period of judges. In the following chart that I want to send a picture to you, I want you to see that Abimelech is listed, but he's not actually a judge. He never delivered Israel from anyone. Instead, he attempted to make himself a king. Judges chapter 9, verse 6. Every other nation had this form of government, but it would be a while before Israel would establish a monarchy. 1 Samuel chapter 10. With the possible exception of Samuel, the leadership of Moses and Joshua was far superior than any of the judges. If you want to look at a list of different judges, you'll find that there are, the numbers are Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, it's going to be chapters 4 and 5, Gideon, Judges chapter 6 through 8, Abimelech is mentioned in Judges 9, Tola, Judges 10, Jair, Judges 10, Jephthah, Judges 11, Ibzan, Judges 12, Elon, Judges 12, Abdon, Judges 12, Samson, Judges 13 through 16, Eli, 1 Samuel 2 through chapter 4, and then Samuel in 1 Samuel chapters 1 through 7. I want to make a few comments now about the incomplete conquest. This coming from Judges chapter 1 through chapter 2, verse 5. Judges chapter 1 through 2:5 is a prologue to the book. The opening sections pick up where the book of Joshua left off with the death of Joshua. Repeatedly, the various tribes are reported as having failed to drive out the evil nations inhabiting Canaan. As a result, the Israelites were influenced by them, even embracing their religions and worshiping their gods. It became so bad that God sent an angel to condemn the people for their failure, warning them of future oppression by those very nations they had failed to destroy. Judges 2, verses 2 and 3. What is this that you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. The Israelites' response to this news was to weep and to offer sacrifices to God. But it was too little, too late. Judgment was coming. Over the next couple of centuries, the judges would be called upon to repeatedly deliver Israel from these oppressive nations. Those nations being the Moabites, the Midianites, the Ammonites, and their arch rival, the Philistines. In the book of Judges, you're going to notice there are cycles that take place, patterns that are reoccurring. A pattern that some will break down into 4 areas, such as, number 1, a relapse, Number 2, a retribution. Number 3, repentance. And number 4, a rescue. The way I like to describe it, it's going to be kind of hard to see here, but what I'll do is I'll be sure to send some, if you would like, some pictures, is the cycle of sin in the book of Judges. You'll find first Israel serving the Lord, doing what they're supposed to do. But then Israelite would fall into sin and idolatry. After that would happen, Israelite would be enslaved or oppressed by another nation. After a period of oppression, Israel would cry out to the Lord. God would then raise a judge. Israel would be delivered by that judge. And then Israel again would serve the Lord. Repeat. 6 times, multiple times, you see this same cycle happen in the book of Judges. One of the sad things that happens with each cycle is that the Israelites would sink deeper and deeper into the muck and mire of sin. In Judges chapter 17 through 21, we would see the complete collapse of society. You'll see this phrase in the book of Judges: because Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. It would go from worse to more worse. In Judges chapter 17, verse 6, as well as Judges chapter 21, verse 25, you have this phrase: in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. God's people have been greatly influenced by their society, that they had slipped into moral relativism. And as a result, the period that the Judges is perhaps the darkest in all of Israelite history. In fact, all of the judges were flagrantly flawed in their character, some worse than others. They were, for the most part, products of their own corrupt society. And despite their shortcomings, several of the judges are praised for their acts of bravery in the New Testament. Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 32. It is during the time of the judges that a bright spot appears. Her name is Ruth. She is a morally upright Gentile, a non-Jewish person. She was from the neighboring country of Moab, who moves to Bethlehem and ultimately would become a great grandmother of King David. A beautiful story that's told in the book of Ruth. Another bright spot that helps bridge the air of the judges is with the kings is Samuel. The long-awaited monarchy will not begin until 1 Samuel chapter 8. But in our next lesson, we will briefly examine what happens in 1 Samuel chapter 1, chapters 1 through 7 with Samuel. He will be our last judge. He will bridge the gap between judges in the period of the United Kingdom, the monarchy. So far, we've noticed these periods in Bible history. Number 1, before Abraham was. It's Genesis 1 through 11. Number 2, Abrahamic promises, Genesis 12 through 50. Number 3, slavery in Egypt. That's Exodus 1 through 15. Number 4, the wilderness wanderings, Exodus 16 through the book of Deuteronomy. Number 5, the conquest of Canaan, the book of Joshua. And then number 6, Judges 1 through 1 Samuel chapter 7. In our next lesson on the overview of the Old Testament, we will look at the United Kingdom from 1 Samuel chapter 8 through 1 Kings chapter 11. Now, as this class is concluding, if you'd like to have further discussion, let me share with you a couple possible discussion questions. Number 1, Rahab lied when asked if she knew the whereabouts of the 2 Israelite spies. And yet, she is praised in Hebrews 11, verse 31 for her faith. Does it mean that lying under certain circumstances is acceptable? Please explain. Number 2, not only did Achan die for his sin, but his entire family died as well. How was this fair, or was God's punishment too harsh? Number 3, the Israelites entered into a covenant relationship with the Gibeonites, not realizing they were from Canaan. According to Joshua 9:14, they should have handled this situation differently by doing what? And the last discussion question, number 4. God told Joshua, I will never leave you nor forsake you, Joshua 1:5. Those words are applied to us in the New Testament in Hebrews 13, verse 5. How does it make you feel knowing that God has made this promise to you? I hope this lesson has been helpful and the pauses were enough time for an appropriate translation to take place. God bless you in your continued study, an overview of the Old Testament.